Welcome to Crafting Confidence, the audio companion to Kristy Coromandel's paper crafting tutorials, helping you create with confidence one project at a time. Today, we're taking a deep dive into dry embossing. We've looked closely at sources from Kristy Coromandel, the founder of the Paper Crafters Academy, and her fantastic tutorials on using this technique. It really seems like the easiest way to instantly level up your paper projects. Our mission today, well, it's simple. Get past just the how-to and really dig into the strategy. How does Kristy use texture to turn plain cardstock into something that looks, well, really high-end?
It's fascinating, isn't it? Because dry embossing, as Kristy frames it, is the perfect gateway technique. She doesn't just see it as adding decoration. For her, it's a strategic process. You're pressing a design into paper, right, using a specific folder and a die cutting or embossing machine. And that physical action, that pressure, creates the relief, either raised that's embossed,
Right.
or recessed, which we call debossed.
And that difference, embossed versus debossed, that's key, isn't it? Especially if you're new to paper crafting. Kristy makes a really clear distinction between dry embossing and heat embossing.
Oh, absolutely. And that's important because, we want you to learn quickly without getting overwhelmed. Heat embossing involves powders, special tools, maybe a heat gun. There's a bit of a learning curve. Dry embossing, it just cuts out all that fuss.
A mess.
Totally mess-free. It's just pressure doing the work. And that makes it, like Kristy says, the quickest way to get that sophisticated look, texture, without the technical headache.
Okay, let's unpack that a bit. If the machine is doing most of the work, the real difference must come down to the tools, right? The folders themselves. What supplies do you really need? And why does Kristy emphasize the differences between folder types so much?
The list is surprisingly short. You basically need a machine, die cutting, or just an embossing folder, and some cardstock. That's it.
Yeah.
But the folder type, that makes a huge difference in the final look. Kristy mainly talks about two kinds, standard and 3D.
Okay, tell us about that. I'm guessing the 3D folders, they need a bit more thought, more strategy involved.
They really do, because they bring in this idea of sculpting the paper. Standard folders have a single layer of etching. They give you that lighter, even texture. Really good for subtle backgrounds, where you don't want the texture to overpower everything else.
Makes sense.
But 3D folders, they use much deeper, multi-layered etched details. They physically push the paper much harder to get that sculpted dimensional look. It changes the whole game.
And if they're pushing harder, that means the setup in the machine, the sandwich, as people call it, that must change too. That sounds like a spot where beginners could get stuck.
That's exactly it. It's a critical technical point. 3D folders are thicker, physically thicker. So running them through your machine usually means you have to take out one of the standard plates. You need less height in the stack to make room for that thicker folder. Kristy always stresses checking your machine's instructions. Because using the wrong setup, too much pressure with a 3D folder, that's the fastest way to warp your plates, or worse, tear your nice cardstock.
Which leads perfectly into maybe Kristy's biggest tip for getting those 3D impressions right without tearing. It's almost surprisingly simple, just adding water.
Yes. And this is where it gets into kind of like the science of the paper itself. It's about making the material more pliable. Paper fibers, they're naturally a bit stiff, so when you hit them with a really deep pressure of 3D folder, they can resist and just crack or tear.
Right.
Kristy's pro tip: lightly mist the cardstock with water before you emboss it, just a light spritz. This softens up those fibers, lets them stretch and mold into all those deep grooves without breaking. It basically turns a potential fail into a flawless, sculpted result.
All right, this is where it gets really strategic. If these folders give such different results, where does Kristy show us how to use that texture effectively? Let's talk about some of her specific projects, starting with that soft pastel card that you're the absolute best one. How does texture work there?
That card is a perfect example of using texture as a foundation for color.
Yeah.
It's a really cheerful card, right? And she uses the exposed brick 3D embossing folder. That gives this really strong, definite structure. But then she puts it behind these soft blended inks: Flirty Flamingo, Daffodil Delight, Coastal Cabana.
I have to admit, I might have thought that a heavy texture like brick would look maybe too harsh, too industrial for soft pastels. But the ink blending seems to change that. What's her timing tip for applying the ink? Does it matter if you ink before or after embossing?
Oh, it definitely matters. The strategy is key here.
Yeah.
Kristy blends the ink onto the cardstock after it's been embossed. And the reason that works so well is that the raised parts of the brick pattern catch the ink beautifully. The deeper recessed mortar lines stay a bit lighter. So the texture itself creates this natural shading and depth. It makes the colors look vibrant, but still grounded.
Okay, then let's swing to the other end of the spectrum. Kristy also uses texture for really elegant, quiet designs, like her sympathy card with deepest sympathy.
Right. And that project shows how texture can almost replace color as the main point of interest. It's very clean, very peaceful, just white cardstock, but with this subtle, leafy texture embossed onto it. The main contrast comes from layering on some soft teal die-cut panels and a simple, very vanilla dove shape.
So for those times when you want something understated, like a sympathy card, that texture adds the sophistication without being loud. It also makes me think about debossing again. We mentioned it briefly. Could that work here too?
Absolutely. For a minimalist card like that, sticking to white on white or tone on tone is a great approach. But strategically, you could choose to deboss that leafy pattern, so pressing the design into the paper instead of raising it up.
Okay.
That creates a really subtle shadowed effect. It can make the whole piece feel even quieter, maybe deeper than a raised pattern might. It's a subtle choice, but effective.
Then we bounce back to maximum impact. Holiday cards. I can just picture a deep 3D folder, maybe with some metallic paper. Instant luxury, right?
Totally. Kristy really shows how essential texture is for holiday projects. You combine, say, a metallic patterned paper with an embossed background, like a pine branch texture she uses, and you immediately get this feeling of depth and richness. The material, the metallic shine, just amplifies the texture. Whether you use a cool blue like Pool Party or a deep cherry cobbler red, the texture makes it feel special, expensive.
And she has a clever tip for making it feel modern too, doesn't she? The split panel idea. That sounds like a good way to use texture without it taking over completely.
Yes, that's a really great try this idea she suggests. Emboss only half of your background panel, maybe the top or one side, and leave the other half completely flat. It creates this really modern, deliberate split look. You get the textural interest, it draws the eye, but you also have clean space for your sentiment or main image. It shows how you can use a traditional tool for a contemporary design.
And finally, Kristy pushes it even further, using embossing not just on cards, but for 3D decor items like that love dove ornament.
Yeah, that really shows the versatility and even the durability of an embossed piece. She layers an embossed dove onto a navy blue circle for the ornament base, then adds little mint stars, a silver script love,
Yeah.
it hangs from a gold hoop. It just proves these folders are great for smaller assembled things too, like gift tags or little keepsakes. Adds that nice tactile quality.
And her specific tip for assembling 3D things like that, it seems crucial for getting it right.
Definitely. She advises embossing your die-cut shapes first before you start sticking them together.
Right, because trying to emboss something already assembled.
Exactly, you'd crush it. The pressure would flatten the whole thing. Embossing the individual parts first means that subtle texture is built in. It catches the light nicely on the final 3D piece, makes it look much more polished and intentional. Which does raise an important point. Even with a technique that seems simple, like just using pressure, things can sometimes go wrong, right? Material failures happen. Kristy offers some really good quick fixes for those common frustrations beginners might run into. Let's start with the big one, the paper tearing.
Okay, so if your paper is cracking or tearing, especially with those deep 3D folders, what's the first thing you should check?
Well, like we talked about with the water missing, the core issue is usually the paper fibers not being pliable enough. So the first fix is try lightly misting the cardstock with water. Or second, make sure you're using a good quality, smoother cardstock. Some papers just handle the pressure better.
Got it. What about uneven texture? You run it through, and some parts look great, others look faint.
Unevenness. That usually points to pressure issues. First, check if the folder is perfectly centered in the machine. Sometimes if it's skewed, the pressure isn't even. But more critically, Kristy points out, you need to check your cutting plates for warping.
Warped plates. That sounds like a sneaky problem. How does that even happen? And how can you tell if yours are warped?
It happens over time, just from repeated use and pressure, especially if you maybe tend to feed the folder through at a slight angle, or if you've accidentally used too thick of a sandwich before. The easiest check, take the plates out and lay them on a truly flat surface like a countertop. If they rock back and forth, or if you can see a visible bow in the middle, they're warped.
And that means uneven pressure.
Exactly, which leads to uneven embossing.
Okay, what if the opposite happens? The texture looks sort of squashed, maybe muddy, over-embossed.
Yeah, squashed is a good word for it. That means you use too much pressure. Instead of nice sculpted detail, everything gets flattened out. The fix is straightforward. You need to reduce the pressure. Usually that means removing one of the plates from your machine's sandwich, or maybe using a center shim if you were using one. The real takeaway here, Kristy emphasizes, is that you have to experiment a little. Think of it like finding the right recipe. You need the perfect sandwich configuration for your specific machine, your specific folder.
Once you've got the basics down, though, Kristy really encourages pushing the boundaries, right? Using these folders in more creative ways. She outlines 5 advanced techniques.
Yeah, turning the tool from just creating texture to being a real design element. First up is partial embossing. This is super strategic. You only feed part of your cardstock into the folder before running it through the machine.
Okay.
So you get texture in one area, but you deliberately leave another area flat and clean. Great for creating negative space behind a sentiment or image.
Then there's the one that sounds really transformative. Ink your folder.
Oh, this one's cool. You literally apply ink, like from an ink pad, directly onto the raised side of the inside of the folder.
Before you put the paper in.
Exactly. Then you put your paper in, close the folder, run it through the machine. Yeah. The pressure transfers the ink onto the paper, but only where the raised design is. So you get an instant background print and texture in one go. It basically turns your folder into a printing plate.
Very clever. Okay, what else? She mentions embossing vellum.
Vellum is that translucent paper. Embossing it gives this really soft, frosted, ethereal look. It catches the light beautifully. Yeah. Very elegant.
And patterned paper embossing, is that just adding texture to paper that already has a print?
Pretty much. But the strategic value is you're adding dimension and a custom feel to off-the-shelf patterned paper. It takes a simple flat print and gives it this subtle raised detail. Makes it feel heavier, more luxurious, more bespoke. It's a really simple way to elevate basic supplies.
Nice. And the last one sounds intense. Double embossing.
Yeah, this is for when you really want maximum texture. You emboss your cardstock once, then you take it out, rotate it maybe 90 degrees and run it through again, either with the same folder or even a different one.
Whoa.
The result is this complex, overlapping, almost cross-hatched effect. Creates really deep, fabric-like texture. It's definitely an advanced move, but it shows how far you can push these tools.
So when you pull it all together, what's the big picture here? Kristy's core message seems to be that dry embossing is maybe the fastest route to boosting your creative confidence.
I think so. It's like an aha technique because it doesn't rely on artistic skill, right? You don't need to draw or paint. But with just one pass through a machine, you transform plain, flat cardstock into something that looks and feels professional. Textured, finished. It's instant impact.
Right. And connecting that to the bigger picture, what really stands out is how effectively texture can do the heavy lifting in a design.
Exactly. A good texture strategy can sometimes replace the need for complicated coloring techniques or layering tons of embellishments. Once you understand how pressure and paper work together, you can create something really striking quite easily. It kind of frees you up from being afraid of complex projects because the core effect is often beautiful and the cleanup is basically zero.
That leaves us with a final thought for you, our listener, to chew on. We talked about combining those advanced techniques. So think about this. How could you specifically blend the ink your folder technique with the partial embossing idea? Imagine applying ink to your folder, getting that instant color, but only running, say, the bottom half of your cardstock through the machine. You could create this really dynamic, colored, textured foreground, maybe like textured ground or waves, while keeping the top half of your card perfectly clean and flat, ready for a beautiful sky or a crisp sentiment, something to experiment with. Thanks for listening to Craft and Confidence. Visit KristyCoromandel.com for project photos, downloads, and more beginner resources.